Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today we're going to be discussing my 2020 Senate election prediction. This is going to be valid for October 24th through October 31st. Yes, Halloween, very spooky. Now, as you know, we are less than 2 weeks out from Election Day, and I just want to throw a brief note in there. So you're getting today's election prediction, you'll get next week's election prediction next Saturday, and I'm also going to be throwing one out the day of Election Day and maybe the day before Election Day, we'll have to see, as well as doing additional ones for the presidential election, which will be coming out next Wednesday, and like I said, on Election Day, possibly the day before, we'll have to see what I'm feeling on that account. Now, I filled in all of the safe seats on the Senate map, so let's dive right into this. Democrats have 48, Republicans have 4D. But, as you can see, there are two states which are likely. This is due to the fact it requires the Democrats to unseat an incumbent, which, as with all things involving incumbency bias, involves a little bit of witchcraft, and you never know if incumbency bias could, at the last minute, click in. As such, I will always leave a seat where an incumbent loses, as likely, but in this case, the Democrats are so far and away ahead, I'm going to put them on the safe initial map because there's not much to talk about here. Now, let's knock off our likely seats so we can get a better view of the actual battlefield. Both parties have two. Republicans have Mississippi and Alabama. These two states are, frankly, competitive in the most mild sense. As you can see here, they're likely Republican, but the two Democratic challengers have shown a strong potency in this battle. Both were able to release polls showing them with at least a competitive nature with their opponents. Alabama much more so than Mississippi here, but the other key factor, large quantities of cash in two of the cheapest states to run ads in. While you can't win an election based on cash alone, looking at you, Michael Bloomberg, you can, however, run an election that is actually competitive with a lot of cash. As such, both of these states have gone from being safe Republican to being now competitive, but still likely Republican. For the Democrats, they start to secure the Northeast with Maine and North Carolina, or the Atlantic coast, I guess. So Maine and North Carolina are basically the same reasoning. Both of them have been pretty consistent in their polling for the Democratic candidate, with them in the high 40s, low 50s, mostly high 40s though, while the Republican is pretty low. They would need a strong spike in support in order to overtake the Democratic candidate, and undecided voters perfectly breaking for them, and all showing up to turn out. In those conditions, it's highly unlikely you're going to win your race. Still is a flip from an incumbency, though, and as such, they are nowhere close to safe, but they're also not leans. As such, they're likely for the Democratic Party, leaving the Democrats with 50 seats, meaning if they win the presidency, as my presidential election currently predicts they will take control of the Senate, barely, but this will hamper their agenda. So the real question is, can the Democrats run up the score and get more than 50 seats? To discuss that, we need to knock out our lean seats. For the Republicans, once again, to help them out a bit, they have Kansas and Alaska. These two states are two states I marked as tilt last time. For those of you who don't know, the way I do toss-ups is, I don't leave a state as a pure toss-up. I will tell you which states are toss-ups when we get to it, but I will say they tilt one way or another. This is due to one simple fact: you can always kind of guess which way a state's gonna go, even if it's really close, and I believe leaving something as just a toss-up is a bit of a cop-out or a way to exacerbate the horse race. As such, Kansas and Alaska are now leans Republican, up from being toss-ups. This is just due to the fact that it looks that if we were going to get some news indicating the Democrats were more competitive or polling better, we would have definitely seen it in Kansas and most likely seen it in Alaska. Both states are still competitive based on what we have, but unfortunately, we don't have much else besides that. Democrats do have one likely seat for them. Not likely, leans. Iowa. Sorry, allergies, my nose is all clogged up. Iowa. There's one key reason Iowa is getting less competitive, and that's due to the Republican Joni Ernst is really struggling. She's stuck in the mid-40s, which when you're in the incumbent you don't want to do, especially when your opponent's at high 40s. The only races she's been competitive in are two polls from I think Routers and Rasmussen is notoriously Republican, and Routers tends to overstate the number of undecided voters. It also doesn't help that most of these undecided voters are in categories. Theresa Greenfield, the Democratic candidate, is most likely to win. As such, Iowa does not return to toss-up. It remains as leans for right now. And thus, we are left with our 5 toss-ups: Montana, Texas, Georgia, both elections, and South Carolina. So, let's knock off Texas, because if you've watched my video, why mail-in voting will turn Texas blue, you can watch it on my channel. You know I'm marking Texas as tilt Republican for the Senate race and tilt Democratic for the presidential race. The reason it's not tilt Democratic for the Senate race is for one key reason. The Democrats are, the Democratic candidate, MJ Hagar, is not polling as well as Joe Biden was, though John Cornyn is polling worse than Trump was. So take that how you will, she can still easily win this in a blue wave scenario. The reason I believe a blue wave's coming in Texas is due to the fact that Texas is now at 76.6% voter turnout. If they maintain their current level of turnout for the next so Texas early voting ends on the 30th. If they maintain this level of voter turnout, it's going, or even have it, they're going to get close to 100% by Election Day, and that's really bad for Republicans, especially because it appears Democrats or Democrat-leaning voters are still in the lead. Last numbers we had out of Texas, 22% of people were new or sporadic voters, meaning they didn't vote in 2018 or 2016, but were registered to vote. And there's a high quantity of youth turnout in Texas as well. All of these factors are bad news for the Republicans. However, I could see a split-ticket vote of I can't vote for Trump, but I want a Republican Senate happening in Texas suburban communities, and for right now, I will leave the Texas Senate race as tilt Republican. Up in Montana, it's tilt Republican as well, because for one main reason. Polling has indicated Steve Daines is ahead. He's the Republican candidate. While the Democratic candidate, Steve Bullock, is lagging behind. He's the current popular governor. However, polls have indicated in a high turnout scenario, Montana flips to the Democrat. And I think there's a solid chance we could have a high turnout scenario. Montana is just behind Texas in high early voting turnout. To give you an idea, most of Montana did all vote by mail elections this year, which encourages high voter turnout, especially compared to 2016. As such, I'm willing to bet Montana is going to be a high turnout election. Will the Republicans still win? I'm putting probably 60% chance of that. But 60% chance, I wouldn't take that shot in XCOM. That's my usual strategy. Or the more general one, if someone pointed a revolver at you and said, let's play Russian roulette, this is a 40% chance of blowing your brains out, you would not probably take them up on that offer. 40% is a really big chance for an opponent. Now down to Georgia and South Carolina. Last time I said all of these are blue. I'm going to slightly change my tune. South Carolina, I'm moving back to red. This is just due to the fact I thought South Carolina would maintain pace with the Deep South on the excitement in early and mail-in voting. So to give you an idea, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, all these competitive southern races are at about 50% voter turnout, 20% ahead of the national average, while South Carolina has fallen and is now hovering slightly below the national average, which makes me believe that while excitement might be initially high, South Carolina has kind of neutralized a bit. As such, it goes back, the very close Senate race goes back into the Republicans' favor. But for Georgia, I'm going to leave both of them as tilt Democratic. This is due to the fact that both races have high excitement. Like I said, we're getting that high voter turnout, which favors the Democrats. For the special election, I won't say much here. We know the Democrats going to the runoff election with either the current incumbent Republican, Kelly Loeffler, or Doug Collins, a challenging Republican. Most likely the incumbent will win that matchup, and it will be Warnock versus Loeffler. And in my opinion, Warnock wins that matchup. Polls say he wins that matchup, and it would be most likely a lower turnout election because it takes place afterwards, but Democrats do have the higher energy and excitement in Georgia, as early voting shows. As for the Maine election, mainline election, I should clarify, it's difficult having a state called Maine that's competitive. You have incumbent Perdue versus challenger Ossoff, and right now Ossoff he's skyrocketed in the polling and is holding a small lead in the averages, while Perdue kind of nips at his heels again. But like I said, we're seeing a lot of turnout indicating a boost in support for the Democrats, which in Georgia will cost Republicans dearly. As such, you're left with the final map for me, which is 53 seats for the Democrats, 47 seats for the Republicans. This is also an especially bad map for Republicans, because right now, Republicans, in my opinion, in their best case scenario, are able to hold 50 seats, meaning Democrats are still likely to win the Senate. However, when you're on the defensive so much, I genuinely believe they are at risk of being, at the very least, thoroughly embarrassed by losing an additional 3 races if they're not careful. As such, with this map favorable to the Democrats, I'm curious to hear your guys' opinions, so drop a comment down below and tell me what you think. Also, if you like the video, drop a like. If you want to see more from this channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted when new content comes out. If you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, I do have a Twitter at OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link in the description. And as always, and most importantly, have a wonderful day.